Good morning, and welcome to today's story, a touching, humane, and educational tale.
What would you do if the only place left for you in the world was a dead laundromat with shattered windows, no power, and a floor cold enough to remind you nobody was coming back for you? At 19, Maya Collins was pushed out with one duffel bag, $43, and a bicycle with bad brakes. By the time the town finally noticed her, she was already standing inside the one abandoned building that would soon matter more than anyone could imagine. This story will show you how pain can sharpen practical courage, how overlooked skills can become real power, and how the place people call worthless may be the very place where a broken life begins again. Maya Collins got kicked out just before supper. Not next week, not after she had time to make a plan. That evening. Her foster mother stood in the doorway with her arms folded tight across her chest, like she was holding herself together by force. "I'm sorry," she said. And Maya could tell right away she wasn't sorry enough to change anything. "We can't do this anymore." Maya looked past her into the house. The television was on in the den, a baseball game. The smell of pot roast drifted through the screen door, the ordinary warmth of somebody else's evening. She had lived in that house for 11 months, which was long enough to memorize the loose porch board by the steps, the hum of the old refrigerator, and the way nobody ever said home unless they were talking about someplace else. Still, some part of her had hoped this one might last longer. She didn't argue. Experience had taught her that arguing only made adults feel righteous. So she bent down, picked up the duffel bag she had packed 3 times before, and unpacked twice, and slung it over her shoulder. Inside were 2 t-shirts, 1 pair of jeans, a faded hoodie, a toothbrush, a phone with a cracked screen, and in the kind of silence that comes from learning not to ask where you're supposed to go next. Her foster father stayed in the kitchen the whole time. That hurt more than if he'd come outside and told her to leave himself. By the time Maya rolled her bicycle down the gravel drive, the late Missouri sun was still burning hot over the fields, turning everything gold and dusty and mean. It was early July, and the heat had settled over town like a punishment. Lawns were yellowing, window units rattled in tired houses. Folks in Mercer's Hollow had started talking about the weather the way people talk about a bad relative who won't leave. Maya pedaled with one hand on the handlebar and the other steadying her duffel bag in the basket. $43. That was what she had. $43 and nowhere to sleep. She rode past the dollar store, the feed shop, the Baptist church with its crooked sign out front, and the gas station where 2 boys from school used to laugh every time she walked in, wearing thrift store sneakers and a face that tried too hard not to care. By 6:30, her shirt was damp with sweat. By 7, the sky had gone from white hot to copper. By 7:15, she knew she couldn't afford a motel, couldn't bring herself to call the one social worker whose voicemail was always full, and couldn't spend the night under the overpass unless she wanted every sound in the dark to teach her a new kind of fear. That was when she saw it. Bluebird Wash. It sat at the far edge of town, past the shuttered pharmacy and the vacant lot full of weeds, like something the world had forgotten on purpose. The old sign leaned sideways. One of the neon letters was gone, so it read, "B.U. Bird Wash" in peeling blue paint. The front windows were hazy with dirt, and one corner of the glass had been patched with plywood that had gone soft around the nails. Maya coasted to a stop. She'd passed the place before. Everybody had. It had been closed for 2 years, maybe more. Long enough for people to stop mentioning it, long enough for it to turn into scenery. But tonight it wasn't scenery. Tonight it had walls. She leaned her bike against the side of the building and stepped up to the front door. The handle didn't budge, locked. She moved around back, pushing through shoulder-high weeds and a rusted chain-link gate hanging off one hinge. A delivery entrance sat crooked beneath a flickering security light that somehow still had enough life left to buzz. The back door looked worse than the front. The frame was split. The lock plate hung loose. Maya set down her bag, pressed one hand against the wood, and felt it give just enough to tell her what she needed to know. She hesitated, not because of the law, because of pride. There's a moment when you've been knocked around long enough, when you realize survival and dignity don't always arrive holding hands. Sometimes survival comes first. Sometimes dignity has to catch up later. She pushed the door open. The air inside was stale and heavy with dust, detergent, and old metal. Rows of industrial washers stood in silence like tired soldiers. Plastic chairs were stacked upside down on two folding tables. A cracked tile floor ran all the way to a long counter in front, where an ancient cash register still sat beside a jar full of dead pens. The place was dim, but not completely dead. A little moonlight slipped through the front windows. Enough to see. Enough to know no one had been there in a long time. Maya took a few cautious steps in. Then she noticed something strange. Near the back wall, beside a utility sink stained with rust, a pipe gave a sharp, uneven click. She froze. A second later, there came the faintest tremor inside the wall. Water. Not flowing strong, not clean enough to trust yet, but there. Maya turned slowly, scanning the room again, this time not like a trespasser, like somebody assessing shelter, like somebody measuring possibility. She walked behind the counter and pulled open a swollen drawer that stuck halfway, then jerked loose with a groan. Inside were yellowed receipts, a busted stapler, 3 quarters, and a sealed envelope with fading ink on the front. No stamp, no address, just 2 handwritten words. Lease papers. At the bottom, almost rubbed away by time, was a name, Evelyn Hart. Maya stared at it for a long moment. Outside, the sun dropped lower. Inside, the old laundromat held its breath around her. And for the first time that day, with nowhere else to go and nothing in front of her that looked easy, Maya Collins felt something small and stubborn rise in her chest. Not hope, not yet, just a reason not to leave. Maya did not sleep much that first night. The laundromat groaned and settled around her like an old man easing into a bad chair. Every little sound felt bigger after dark. A pipe knocking in the wall, a loose sign tapping outside in the wind, the low electric buzz of that dying security light behind the building. She laid her hoodie on the tile floor behind the counter and used her duffel bag for a pillow. But sleep came in short, wary pieces. Still, when morning pushed a pale stripe of light across the cracked floor, she was there, still there. And for Maya Collins, that mattered more than most people would understand. She got up stiff, hot, and dusty. The air inside Bluebird Wash already smelled like old soap, rust, and summer heat. Missouri in July had a way of getting into a building before breakfast. By 9 in the morning, the place felt like it had been sitting in the sun for years, just waiting for somebody foolish enough to step inside and think they could bring it back. Maya found a broom in the supply closet with half the bristles bent sideways. She used it anyway. Dust rolled across the floor in pale gray clouds. Lint, dead bugs, old receipts, bottle caps, a single child's sock stiff with age. She swept around the washers under the folding tables, behind the plastic chairs. Then she wiped down the counter with paper towels she found in a box marked inventory from some year nobody cared to remember. She worked without rushing. That was one thing life had taught her. Panic wasted energy. Quiet work changed things. By noon, she had opened the back door for air, hauled 3 bags of trash into the alley, and figured out which machines were dead, which were maybe dead, and which were just waiting for somebody patient enough to listen. That was the thing about Maya. She listened to broken things. She had learned how in pieces over the years, in houses that never became home. One foster mother made her wash laundry for a family of 6 before she was tall enough to reach the detergent shelf without standing on tiptoe. Another kept a roll of quarters in a coffee tin and barked if Maya used too much hot water. In one home, the dryer door never latched unless you lifted it just right with your knee. In another, the washing machine shook so hard during the spin cycle, it sounded like it was trying to escape the laundry room. Nobody meant to teach her, but they did. That was how life often worked for girls like Maya. People used them up and accidentally left them skilled. She crouched in front of the 3rd washer from the wall and removed the rusted lower panel with a butter knife she had found in a drawer. A belt was loose, not snapped, just worn and slack. She ran her fingers over it, then looked around until she found an old maintenance cart near the utility sink. Inside were 2 screwdrivers, half a roll of tape, a crescent wrench, and a coffee can full of mismatched bolts. Maya almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it felt like the building had decided not to fight her. Not yet. She was tightening a bracket on the back of a machine when a shadow moved across the open rear doorway. "You keep fooling with that panel, you're gonna light yourself up." The voice was male, calm, flat, young but not careless. Maya straightened fast and turned. A man stood outside in the alley, broad-shouldered, sunburned, maybe mid-20s. He wore a faded gray t-shirt, work jeans, and boots dusted white from drywall or plaster. One hand rested on the fence post beside him. The other held a paper cup from May's diner. He nodded toward the exposed wiring. Capacitor on those old units can still hold a charge. Maya narrowed her eyes. You planning to help or just narrate my funeral? One corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. Depends. You planning to touch that red wire again? She looked back at the machine. He was right. She stepped away from it. The man came closer, but not too close. Like he understood the difference between offering help and crowding somebody. He leaned down, pointed with 2 fingers, and said, You kill power first, then you test, then you put your hands in. Maya crossed her arms. The power's already out. Main line isn't, he said, not completely. That got her attention. He crouched beside the machine and checked the wall box with the ease of somebody who had done it 1,000 times. Name's Noah, he said. Noah Bennett. Maya. He glanced at the rows of half-dead washers, the dust bags by the door, the counter she had already cleaned. Then he looked at her again, not with pity, not with suspicion exactly, but with the kind of steady curiosity people wore when they knew more than they were saying. You staying here? Maya held his gaze. I'm standing here. That almost earned a real smile. Noah reached into the back pocket of his jeans, pulled out 2 used ceramic fuses and set them on the counter. These might still work, might not, better than nothing. Then he stood, brushed his hands together, and headed back toward the alley. Maya blinked. That's it? He looked over his shoulder. That's what I've got till lunch break's over. She watched him leave. No promise, no speech, no questions she didn't want to answer. Just help, sat down plain and quiet. Later that afternoon, the heat turned mean. The kind that pressed against the windows and made the whole town feel irritated with itself. Maya finally got a thin line of water running from the utility sink. It sputtered brown at first, then clearer. Not perfect, but usable. She washed her hands, splashed cool water over the back of her neck, and stood there longer than she meant to, letting herself feel the relief. That was when she heard a child crying out front. A woman stood in the doorway, one little boy on her hip, another clinging to her hand. Her hair was damp with sweat. Her face had the drawn, worn look of someone stretching every dollar and every ounce of patience farther than either was meant to go. Sorry, she said. I saw the back door open. I thought maybe... She paused, embarrassed. Do you have any cold water in here? Maya looked at the boy on her hip. His cheeks were flushed red from the heat. She nodded toward the sink. Not cold, but cleaner than outside. The woman let out a tired breath that sounded almost like gratitude. My name's Tessa, she said softly. Thank you. Maya handed her a paper cup from the counter. And as Tessa stood there cooling her children 1 sip at a time, Maya looked around Bluebird Wash again. At the machines, at the sink, at the cracked floor, at the shadowy stillness of a place the whole town had written off. For the first time, she didn't see just shelter. She saw use. Real use. Not for someday. For now. By the 3rd day, Bluebird Wash no longer looked abandoned. It still looked tired. Still sun-faded. Still cracked around the edges. Still like a place life had stepped away from too quickly. But it no longer looked empty. The front windows had been wiped clean enough for daylight to come through. The counter had been cleared. 3 washers stood open and waiting, their insides scrubbed and their loose parts lined up on an old towel like instruments before surgery. Maya was kneeling on the floor with a wrench in one hand and sweat running down the back of her neck when the bell above the front door gave a rusty little jolt. She looked up. A woman stood there in a linen blouse the color of oatmeal, with silver hair pinned back low and a face that held the kind of poise money couldn't buy and hardship couldn't fully erase. She was older, early 60s maybe, straight posture, sharp eyes, the sort of woman who noticed things before other people had finished pretending not to. Her gaze traveled over the room, the cleaned counter, the trash bags stacked near the back, the washers in pieces, then Maya. So, the woman said quietly, you're the girl who decided to move into my laundromat. Maya stood too fast and nearly dropped the wrench. For 1 quick second, fear hit her clean and cold. Not because she had somewhere else to go, because she didn't. She set the wrench down. If you want me out, just say it plain. The woman studied her for a moment longer, then stepped inside and shut the door behind her. I'm Evelyn Hart. The name landed exactly where Maya already knew it would. The envelope, the lease papers, the handwriting worn soft with time. Maya wiped her palms on her jeans. I found your name in the drawer. I figured you might. Evelyn moved slowly through the laundromat, touching the back of a plastic chair, the edge of the counter, the frame of a washer. Not sentimental, just careful. like she was measuring what had changed and what had not. You cleaned more in 3 days than the bank's done in 2 years, she said. Maya said nothing. Praise had always made her nervous. It usually came right before conditions. Evelyn stopped beside the washer Maya had been repairing. You know what you're doing? Enough to keep learning. That answer seemed to please her. Outside, a pickup rolled past with music thumping low. Somewhere across the street, somebody shouted for a dog. The ordinary sounds of town life carried on as if nothing important were happening in that old building at all. Then Evelyn turned and faced her fully. If you can get 3 washers running, 1 dryer heating, and the utility sink flowing clean without leaking through the wall, she paused. You can stay here for now. Maya blinked. Just like that? No, Evelyn said. Not just like that. Like work. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small ring with 2 keys and laid it on the counter. 1 for the front, 1 for the supply closet. Maya stared at them but didn't touch them yet. There'll be rule, Churkun, Evelyn added. No stealing power from the grid. No letting drifters tear the place apart. No pretending this building can save everybody just because you need it to save you. That last line caught Maya off guard. She looked down. I wasn't pretending. I know, Evelyn said softer now. That's why I came back. Then after a beat, she added, your mother used to have that same look when she'd already made up her mind. Maya's head lifted so fast it almost hurt. My mother? Evelyn seemed to realize, too late, how sharp that word still was. But she didn't step away from it. I knew her some, she said. Years ago. Maya's throat tightened. No one ever spoke about her mother with details. Just broken scraps. A first name here, a mistake there. The general shape of a woman who had not stayed long enough for anyone to remember her kindly or clearly. Before Maya could ask another question, the front door opened again. Tessa stepped in with both boys in a brown paper sack tucked under one arm. I brought lunch, she said, then stopped when she saw Evelyn. Oh, sorry, I didn't know. It's fine, Evelyn said. Tessa handed the sack to Maya. Inside were 2 egg salad sandwiches, a bruised apple, and a bottle of iced tea wrapped in a napkin to keep it cool. You've been helping people already, Tessa said, glancing at the sink. Word gets around. Maya gave a small shrug, but Tessa kept going. My boys slept better last night after they cooled off. She smiled at her sons. That mattered. For a second, the room held a feeling Maya didn't trust yet. Not comfort, not belonging, but the faint outline of both. Then the screen door banged open hard enough to rattle the glass. Sheriff Dale Mercer stepped inside, hat low over his brow, jaw set in the practical way of a man who didn't enjoy making trouble, but had long ago accepted it as part of the job. He took in the scene with one sweep of his eyes. Maya Collins, he said, I'm told you've got people coming in and out of here. Water running, machines being worked on. His voice wasn't cruel. That almost made it worse. Building's not cleared for operation, he said. No active permit, no inspection, no liability coverage. If this turns into some half-baked public stopgap and somebody gets hurt, I shut it down. You understand me? Maya felt the heat in the room all over again. The weight of being almost useful, almost safe, almost allowed. She nodded once. I understand. The sheriff looked at the clean machines, then at Tessa's boys, then at the keys still lying on the counter near Maya's hand. His face gave nothing away. Good, he said. Then don't make me come back with a padlock. When he left, the room felt smaller. Tessa shifted uneasily. Evelyn's expression went hard and unreadable. From the alley came the hum of a truck engine, then the sound of it dying. A moment later, Noah appeared in the back doorway, carrying a metal toolbox in one hand and a used box fan in the other. He looked from Maya's face to the front door, then to the room itself. Sheriff already stopped by, he asked. Maya let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Yeah. Noah set the fan down. Then we better move faster. That evening, while the heat sat over Mercer's hollow like a hand that would not lift, the radio at the front counter crackled through a weather bulletin. Excessive heat warning extended. Possible rolling outages across the county. Peak demand expected to strain the grid through the weekend. Nobody in the room said a word for a second. Then Maya looked at the washers, at the sink, at the fan, at the keys, and deep down, past the fear and the ache and the old habit of expecting everything good to be temporary, she knew this place was no longer just where she had landed. It was becoming the thing the town would need before the town was ready to admit it. By the time Friday night came, the heat had turned vicious. Not the ordinary kind people complained about from shaded porches with a glass of sweet tea in hand. This was the kind that pressed itself against windows, lingered in the walls, crawled under shirts and into lungs. The kind that made babies cry harder, old folks breathe slower, and tempers rise faster than they should. Bluebird Wash had been working all day. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough. 3 washers ran in staggered cycles. One dryer gave off a stubborn, uneven heat that Noah called good enough if nobody asked it to be noble. The utility sink was flowing clear now, and the box fan in the corner pushed warm air around with more loyalty than strength. Maya had spent the afternoon handing out paper cups of water, wiping down counters, tightening loose valves, and pretending she wasn't counting every sound the machines made. Every rattle mattered, every flicker mattered. Every little strain in the wiring felt personal. Just after 8:30, the lights blinked once. Then again, the hum of the washer stuttered. Tessa, who was folding clothes near the back with her boys half asleep on a blanket, stopped mid-motion and looked up. Noah came out from behind the supply closet with a wrench in his hand. Maya didn't say anything right away. She just listened. Outside, the whole town seemed to hold its breath. Then the power went out. Not a dip, not a brownout. Gone. The laundromat fell into a heavy, breathless dark, broken only by the weak yellow beam of Noah's flashlight and the thin wash of moonlight coming through the front windows. One of Tessa's boys whimpered. From somewhere down Main Street came the sharp rise of voices, then a car horn, then another. In the distance, a dog started barking and would not stop. Noah muttered under his breath. Whole grid just dropped. Maya's pulse kicked hard, but her voice came out steady. The generator. He was already moving. They reached the back room together, sweat breaking fresh across their skin in the sudden stillness. The old backup generator sat where Noah had helped wire it 2 days earlier, ugly as sin and nearly as temperamental, patched together from salvage parts and stubbornness. Tell me it'll hold, Maya said. Noah pulled the cord once. Nothing. Twice. A cough. A sputter. Then a rough, rattling roar that sounded like an old pickup dragged back to life one last time. A second later, the fan turned. One strip of overhead light flickered on, then another. Not full power. Just enough. Tessa let out a breath that sounded like a prayer. But word traveled fast in a town like Mercer's Hollow. Too fast. Within 20 minutes, headlights began pulling into the gravel lot. First one truck, then 2 cars, then Sheriff Mercer's patrol unit, then more. Maya stood behind the counter as people came through the front door, flushed red from the heat, shirts damp, children limp against their shoulders, elderly parents leaning on canes, walkers, and grown sons who looked scared enough to finally forget their pride. The room filled with the smell of sweat, detergent, dust, and the sour edge of panic. Maya, my mama can't breathe in that house. Do you still have cold water? My AC died an hour ago. Please, just for a little while. And then, like a slap from the past wearing a familiar face, the couple who had thrown her out stood near the entrance too. Her former foster mother wouldn't quite meet her eyes. Her foster father finally did. That hurt more than if he hadn't. For one brief, dangerous second, something hard rose up inside Maya. Not anger exactly. Older than anger. The memory of being unwanted. The memory of standing outside someone else's door with a bag in her hand while supper stayed warm inside. She could have said no. No one in that room would have blamed her for it, not truly. But before she could speak, Noah came close and lowered his voice. The generator's running hot. Maya turned. How hot? He looked toward the back room. Too many bodies, too much draw. We keep everything on, we risk losing the whole thing. Maybe worse. So that was the choice. Open the place fully and risk burning out the one thing keeping them alive. Or shut people out and let the town cook in the dark. Sheriff Mercer stepped forward, hat in hand now, not wearing authority so much as exhaustion. My mother's in the cruiser, he said quietly. If you can help us get her cooled down, I'll keep order in here. Tessa spoke up next. I'll take the kids, keep them together, keep them calm. Then one of the older men near the door, a man who had once laughed when Maya was sweeping the sidewalk out front, cleared his throat and said, Tell us what to do. The room went still. That was the moment. Not when the power failed, not when the cars pulled in, but when people who had spent their whole lives deciding what Maya was worth finally stood there waiting for her to lead. She swallowed once and pointed toward the back. No more dryers, no extra lights, fan rotation every 10 minutes. Then toward the sinks. Fill every container you can, cups, buckets, whatever you got. To Tessa, she said, Kids on the floor by the washers, coolest part of the room. To Sheriff Mercer, bring your mother in first, then keep the doorway clear. To Noah more quietly, what do you need from me? He gave her one quick look, steady and certain. "Keep them calm," he said. "I'll keep us running." And so she did. Not like a hero in a movie. Not with speeches, not with grace every second. She did it tired, hot, scared, thinking 3 steps ahead because she had spent half her life learning what happened when nobody else did. By midnight, the laundromat had become something stranger and bigger than any of them had planned. Not just a laundromat, not just a shelter. A place held together by duct tape, cold water, human hands, and the fierce, practical courage of a girl this town had almost left behind. And as Maya stood in the middle of it all, listening to the generator growl, to children settling, to old people breathing easier in the moving air, she understood something with sudden, breathtaking clarity. This night was changing everything. Not because the town had finally come to save her, because it hadn't. Because somehow, against all reason, she had become the one holding the door open. By the time morning came, the worst of the heat had not passed, but the panic had. The first pale light slipped through the front windows of Bluebird Wash and landed across sleeping children, half-empty paper cups, damp towels, and tired faces that no longer looked quite so frightened. The generator was still running. Barely. It coughed now and then, like an old man trying to clear his throat, but it held. And so did Maya. She had not slept. Not really. She had spent the night moving from one corner of the laundromat to the next, checking on Sheriff Mercer's mother, helping Tessa settle the boys, handing out water, opening and closing the door in careful turns to keep the room from turning stale. By sunrise, her hair was stuck to the back of her neck, her t-shirt was damp with sweat, and her legs ached from standing. But for the first time in a long time, exhaustion did not feel empty. It felt earned. Noah came out of the back room wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. "We made it," he said. His voice was quiet, almost disbelieving. Maya looked around the room, at the older men sleeping in plastic chairs, at the mothers cradling their children, at the teenagers charging phones near the wall, at the sheriff still awake, sitting beside his mother with his hat folded in his lap instead of on his head. Then she looked back at Noah. "Yeah," she said softly, "I guess we did." Not long after that, the town's power came back in pieces. First a flicker across the street, then the gas station sign, then the low hum of window units waking up one house at a time. A murmur moved through the laundromat. Relief. Not loud, not dramatic, just deep. People began gathering their things slowly, like they were almost reluctant to leave the one place that had carried them through the night. Sheriff Mercer stood first. He walked over to Maya, tired-eyed and heavy with the kind of humility that does not come easy to proud men. "I was wrong about this place," he said. Then after a pause, "And I was wrong about you." Maya did not answer right away. Some apologies come too late to fix what they broke, but that did not mean they meant nothing. She gave a small nod. "That place out there got hot," the sheriff said, glancing toward the street. "This place didn't fall apart." "No," Maya said, "it didn't." Tessa came next, one sleepy boy holding each of her hands. She pulled Maya into a quick, tired hug before Maya had time to brace for it. "You kept my kids safe," she whispered. That one hit deeper than Maya expected. Because all her life, people had talked about what she needed, what she lacked, what she cost, what burden she carried into a room. But now someone was thanking her for what she had given. That changes a person. Outside, the parking lot was already filling again by noon. Not with people begging for help this time, with people bringing things. A retired plumber showed up with spare fittings and a coffee can. A church lady brought sandwiches, bananas, and 2 cases of bottled water. 3 high school boys dragged and donated folding chairs from the fellowship hall. Somebody painted over the broken Bluebird sign by late afternoon. By evening, there were buckets, mops, fans, clean towels, and a handwritten sign-up sheet taped near the front window for volunteers. No speeches, no parade, just people quietly deciding this place mattered. Evelyn Hart arrived near sunset. She stood beside Maya at the counter, looking out at the room that now felt alive in a way it had not for years. Then she reached into her purse and set a folded document on the counter. Maya looked down. Lease papers, the same ones she had found in the drawer. Only now there was a new signature line waiting at the bottom. Evelyn rested one hand lightly over the paper. "Your mother once told me a laundromat can be more than a business," she said. She said when people are struggling, a clean shirt, cool water, and a place to sit down with dignity can mean more than most folks realize. Maya swallowed hard. "She said that?" "She did." Evelyn's voice softened. "And she was right, so are you." For a moment, Maya could not speak. All those years of being passed from house to house, of learning how not to ask for much, of being careful not to hope too hard. And here it was, not a miracle, not a rescue, something steadier than that. A place, a purpose, a door she had opened for others, and somehow walked through herself. She picked up the pen with a trembling hand and signed her name, Maya Collins. Simple as that, but not small, never small. That night, after the last volunteer left and the quiet settled gently over Bluebird Wash, Maya locked the front door and stood for a second under the hum of the lights. The room still smelled like detergent, warm metal, and fresh paint. The chairs were stacked. The sink was clean. The machines were silent for now. And for the first time in her life, when Maya looked around the place where she was standing, she did not feel like she was borrowing time inside somebody else's world. She felt like she belonged. So let me ask you this. If life backed you into a corner, would you still have the courage to build something useful out of what everybody else threw away? And if someone who once turned their back on you came back needing help, would you open the door? If this story stayed with you, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments what mattered more in Maya's journey: survival, forgiveness, or finally finding a place to belong.